What's going on, football fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and prop preview for Monday Night Football between the Raiders and the Cowboys. Going to get you ready for all of your exposure this evening. But first off, a breakdown of the Draftkings side and what we're doing for our single game lineups. That'll include an injury report, some of the GPP ownership, where the rest of the field is going with their lineups, so you can know where to get your leverage, where to make some of your stands against what the rest of the field is doing, to hopefully find yourself towards the top end of those GPPs. And then afterwards, we're going to go through the underdog and the prize pick side, some of the pick 'em exposure and some of the props I've already entered for tonight's game as well. So you'll have an idea across the board of what to do for this evening. So without further ado, we've got a lot to go through here. Let's go ahead and get this thing going. From the game script perspective, we've got a pretty run-of-the-mill slate tonight. We've got a 3.5 point spread favoring the Cowboys. High total, though, at 49.5 points. Maybe that's the most notable aspect in that, combined with a relatively close spread, is I think going to lead to a lot of 3-3s in the large field GPPs, and then passing heavy 4-2s as well, where you have both quarterbacks, maybe one quarterback, and then 2 to 3 pass catchers from the same team. That is what you're going to see the vast majority of the time, which means if you're looking to get different in the large field GPPs, just commit to one team or the other. And it doesn't have to be quite a full 5-1 onslaught that you're playing, but even a 4-2 with some more rushing options, maybe a defense or a kicker mixed in from the team that has 4 players, would be the way to get a little bit of that differentiation. So before we start going player by player, I think it's always important to know where the rest of the field is going so you can cater your exposure towards it, because if you think that the Raiders have a good chance to win tonight, by the way, they are those 3.5 point underdogs, then you might want to play in the large field GPPs, because their ownership on average, as you'll see across the board when we go through these projections, is going to be a hair lower than what we have on the Dallas side. So you can leverage that if you have that kind of a stand. Whereas if you believe in the Cowboys that are going to be a little bit higher owned, you might want to cater your exposure to some of the single entries or smaller field GPPs where you don't have to be as differentiated with your lineups. But let's start up top with a CD Lamb at $11,000. A bit expensive, but we don't have as many priorities to use in the 9-10K range. A lot of times, like last night, for example, there's like 7 to 8 studs, skill position players that we would like to use in our player pool. There's 3 or 4 priorities that we have on the slate. So 11 grand for Lamb works, particularly if you have a punt play towards the bottom to help open up some salary. But even at a 1.8x points per dollar value, he's a half decent play on this sort of a slate. Next up, we got Dak Prescott, who's $10,400. Maybe a bit expensive, but with a nearly 50-point total, I think it's well warranted. You can still play him. Just make sure you're using him with at least one pass catching option, as he's not a rushing heavy quarterback like a Josh Allen, a Jalen Hurts. They can get there with their rushing usage alone. And I would say if you're using him at captain, you want at least 2 passing catching options along with him, maybe even 3 in that sort of a format. So just make sure you're running with that correlation wherever you can. And you shouldn't have any lineups tonight where it's just 5 players from the Vegas and then a Dak Prescott buying it back. I mean, you'd just be donating money at that point in the large field GPPs, which is something that if you're entering 150 lineups, that you have to have a process for. You don't want to be entering any lineups that don't make any sense. Some people do it with the roles in their optimizer, make sure that they're setting them so they don't get any of those silly outcomes, but it's hard to rule out all of those outliers. So when you're going and entering a set of 150 lineups, you should be skimming through them via hand to go through and make sure that they're correct. And some people do have more intricate systems to go out there and do so, but if you're your everyday player, just make sure you're doing your due diligence and going through that. And the next thing we got here is an Ashton Jeanty at $10,000. I would also say a bit expensive for most showdown slates, but because he is juiced towards the over to score at a lot of sports books, he's carrying a solid projection at 19.1 points, which puts him at 1.9x points per dollar value, which is why he is still 50% owned. So you're not quite getting the ownership discount on a Jeanty quite yet. It's more so with the mid to lower tier guys where the Raiders are being a bit overlooked. Jeanty at 50% though, you're going to have to commit to him to get leverage and to get over the field. So I'm personally leaning towards maybe matching the field on somebody like a Jeanty, just because I do think the Cowboys are the deserving favorites tonight, but I won't be avoiding them. And in my large field GPP exposure, or I'm entering some 4-2 Raiders builds and maybe even a handful of some 5-1 full onslaughts, just in case we get a wacky outcome tonight. Jeanty, of course, would be a prime beneficiary of any heavy script towards the Raiders, as he'll get more second half usage as that bruising running back. It could also have some more red zone looks as well. Next up, we got Javonte Williams at $9,800, who is personally my favorite player on the slate, and it's kind of has a lot to do with the game script that I'm imagining happens. I expect the Cowboys to be winning by a touchdown, maybe even 2 touchdowns in the second half. That's just the way that I lean on this sort of a slate. And Javonte's cheaper than Jeanty and about the same kind of ownership, and it's about 3.5% higher at flex. He's about 1.5% higher owned at the captain position. projection, so it's very small margins from player to player. I think this should be closer to a 10 to 15% split from player to player. So at $9,800, a 2x points per dollar projection, but I think it will be a positive game script for a lot of the second half, has me really liking him in a lot of my DFS lineups, and not just at flex, but also at captain, where I can try and get to one of those lower owned game scripts and one of those lower owned combinations in the large L GPPs where I'm not going to be duplicating myself with 50 to 200 plus people, maybe using a Javonte with a Cowboys defense for some of that correlation, or with a Javonte and a Brandon Aubrey at slightly lower ownership to get off some of the chalky skill position players and give myself a chance to have something unique. And that combined with leaving salary on the table is how we accomplish that in the large field GPPs. It's not just about trying to get to some low-owned players or low-owned combinations. Low-owned's not at the captain position. You can see Javonte is still 14.5%. He's the second highest owned captain that I have on the slate. It's just that a lot of people are going to be using a Javonte at captain and then not going all in on the Cowboys. They're still going to be running a 3-3, maybe a 4-2 with some pass catching options from the other side. I would say if you're going to go with that Javonte Williams lineup, commit to it, right? Go all in, go balls deep on that sort of a lean. Don't go half in like a lot of the rest of the field is going to. Next up, we got George Pickens at $9,000. Very expensive for the kind of floor that he brings, but he has one of the highest ceilings that we have on the slate because he's fantastic at high pointing the football. It always gives him red zone upside when the Cowboys get within the 20, and he's also somebody that's got big play upside because of his yak ability. So at $9,000, he's much more of a GPP play than what you'd have in cash/single entries, and really to this point, we haven't had any bad plays for cash/single entries yet. I guess maybe a CeeDee Lamb because he's super expensive at $11,000, but the 1.7x mark on a George Pickens also isn't that terrible. I mean, we've had spend ups that were in the 1.4 to 1.5x range over the last couple slates. So if you want to use them in a cash/single entry, I don't think it's the craziest thing that I've ever seen, but there are some more efficient players that you can use around him. Geno Smith is $8,800. He's also about 50% combined ownership for the slate, and just like a Dak Prescott, you want to be using them with at least one pass catcher, and if not at least two in a lot of cases. At captain, you can extend that to 2 to 3 pass catchers per lineup, because without the rushing aspect, if they're going to post 20 to 25 fantasy points, they're bringing on at least 1 to 2 pass catchers along with them. So I think it's a fair price tag. It does have a 2x points per dollar mark, which is keeping the ownership high though. And like I mentioned with Genty, the ownership doesn't really start to fall off until we get to the mid to lower tier range. So up top, I do like the Cowboys skill position players just a little bit more because I think that they should have that 10 to 15% higher ownership, and it doesn't look like that's going to be the case, at least early on a Monday. Next up, we got a Brock Bowers at $8,000. He's the best points per dollar value that we have up top at 2.2x, and that's easy to imagine as he is way underpriced for the kind of role that he brings. He's essentially the wide receiver one for the Raiders, and although Jacoby Myers was that before he left, now he's out of town and has even more usage to work with. So at captain, I've got him at about 16%, the highest ownership mark that we have on the slate. I don't know if I can get behind that, as I think some of the other skill position players, in particular on the Cowboys side, might have the same, if not even higher, captain equity than what we have with Brock Bowers, but still a great play. You jam him in whenever you can, but you're just not going to get any differentiation with it, because even in this $8,000 range, he's about 60% combined ownership, which is one of the highest marks that we've seen for an 8K player on the year. Next up, we got Jake Ferguson at $7,400. He's only a 1.5x points per dollar value, which is, terrible compared to Brock Bowers at just $600 more, which is leading to insanely low ownership. In fact, a Jake Ferguson is less than half the ownership of a Brock Bowers at about 25% between flex and captain. So if you're looking to get different on the Dallas side, I mean, a Jake Ferguson captain lineup would be instantly different to what the rest of the field is doing. But even at the flex position here with this 20% ownership mark, it's a way to start to get different. That combined with leaving salary on the table is again how we accomplish getting a unique lineup in the large field GPPs. Next up, we have the true wide receiver one for the Raiders. That would be Trey Tucker at $6,600. He does have a low floor though, as he's a big player bust sort of wide receiver, but without Jacoby Myers, he is going to see a larger target share than what he's had for the rest of the year, so don't sleep on him in this sort of a slate either. Next up, we have both of these kickers, which in a dome at elevation and with a 50-point total are projecting through the roof on this kind of a slate. In fact, that's why they're a little bit more expensive than some of the other kickers that we've had this year, but Aubrey is a 1.9x points per dollar value at a 10-point projection. I don't know if we've ever seen a 10-point projection for a kicker, at least in 2025. We haven't had that sort of number, but even Carlson at 8.5 points and a 1.7x points per dollar projection is somebody that you want to look to in some of your lineups. Next up, we got a Ryan Flanoy. He's seen a lot more snaps and a lot more targets over the last couple games. Unfortunately, though, he's a whole $4,600. And the rest of the year, he's been like $1,500 to maybe $2,500. It is just way too big of a step up in price tag. And that's why he's at a 0.9x points per dollar value. Also, only 6% owned in the large shell GPPs. So he is going to see the field. He probably is going to see at least 1 to 2 targets. It's just that he's going to have to turn that small target share into a big play touchdown. And if he does, he could absolutely crack open the slate at sub 10% ownership. But if you're using him in single entries or cash, I mean, you're an absolute clown at that point, right? Taking somebody with less than 1 points per dollar value is probably a big of a fish play as you could possibly make. But in the right sort of formats and with the kind of risk tolerance, you got to have a whole lot of risk tolerance to play a Ryan F here. It could be worth it in that kind of scenario. Next up, we got the Cowboys defense, who's going to be the key for me to differentiate a lot of my Cowboys-led lineups. 1.9x points per dollar value is not why you play a defense. You play them for the special teams touchdown. You play them for the return touchdown. And because Geno Smith is a bit turnover heavy at that quarterback position, that is always something that's within the range of outcomes. So I'll be using him alongside some Javonte Williams captain exposure to try and get the correlation between those two. And again, to try and get myself a little bit different than what the rest of the field is going to be doing tonight. The 49.5 point total does limit the upside of these defenses, but you don't play the defenses for the lack of points that they're letting up. I think that's a huge misconception in this industry. You play them for the sacks, the interceptions, the turnovers, and that potential touchdown that you can get too. Next up, we got Michael Mayer at $4,000. He's a 1.8x points per dollar value. He's still going to be playing a ton, especially with Jacoby Myers out of the mix, and they were one of the most two tight end set teams in all of the NFL. So he was already playing a lot of snaps, probably going to play even more after that departure. So somebody you could use on Las Vegas for some differentiation. Only about 15% combined ownership. Raiders defense, I'm not sure if I could stomach that myself, but if you're somebody that's a little bit more favorable, a little bit more positive on the Raiders side of things, you're playing some 4-2s or even some 5-1 onslaughts, they should probably be a piece of your player pool. Personally, not going to be a part of mine though. Tyler Lockett at $3,400. He's a 2x points per dollar value down low, one of the more efficient price tags that we have on the slate. Unfortunately though, he is getting the most ownership of all of these value options. So if you're in a cash, a single entry, you get away with it. You throw him in there with no problems, but not so much when you're playing in the big $5 or $25 GPPs. Kevontae Turpin, the gadget player for the Dallas offense, he's also the kick and punt returner for them too. So if you're playing the Dallas defense, you might want to consider double dipping on Turpin and the Cowboys, because if Turpin scores, you'd get double bonus for that, right? 6 points for Turpin and 6 points for the Cowboys defense. So anytime I'm playing an elite tier returner like Devin Hester back in the day, it was the same way, right? Turpin is that kind of a threat that you legitimately might want to have some, 5 to 10% of your lineups correlating those two. You got a Raheem Mostert at $2,400. He's been the running back 2 for Las Vegas lately. Zamir White hasn't been active for them, so it's been a whole lot of Mostert. The issue is he's only a 1.2x points per dollar value, and because he is $2,400, he probably still has to score 6 to 7 fantasy points to get to the optimal lineup, which for a player that's only getting 4 to 5 touches per game likely means that he has to fall into the end zone. Dante Thorne Jr. is an extremely low floor wide receiver for the Raiders, but he'll be cycling in as maybe the wide receiver 3/4 tonight. He does have big play upside though, so unlike a Lockett, a Trey Tucker, he's got a bigger frame than those two. So if you're looking for somebody to high point a 50 to 60 yard play or even a touchdown in the red zone, Thorne's the much more likely player to do so. So 1.5x points per dollar value is not the kind of play you'd be using in cash/single entries, but does make sense in some of the more volatile formats. It's Luke Schoonmaker, $1,600, tight end 2 for Dallas. He plays quite a bit as they also run a lot of 2 tight end sets, but at $1,600, he's got to get 5 to maybe 8 fantasy points to pay off that kind of price tag. He's also a touchdown or bust sort of option. Jaden Blue has been the backup running back for Dallas lately. They have given him the reins in that sort of a role. A 1.6x points per dollar value, and if you're playing an onslaught lineup towards Dallas, maybe you want to consider using some Blue alongside of Javonte Williams, because let's say it's one of the fringe outcomes where it's like a 3 to 4 touchdown differential between these two teams. Jaden Blue might get a little bit of blowout run in that kind of scenario. We've also got a Jack Beck, also in Alex Bachman for Las Vegas next. $1,000, $800 for those 2 wide receivers. They're going to be the 3/4 wide receivers for Las Vegas. It's not really a set in stone kind of rotation with those guys. It's more so going to be that all of them end up playing tonight, probably in that 30 to 50% range. So a Beck, somebody you could throw in there. He's that rookie wide receiver. They drafted him early, so they expect a lot of things from him. So he's probably my favorite out of those two. We've got Ian Thomas, the 3rd string tight end for Las Vegas, is really only in play because of how many 2 tight end sets they play. If Mayer or Bowers ends up needing to sit, he would end up cycling in. Then you've got the fullback for Dallas next. That is Hunter Lepke at $400. He's touchdown or bust. He hardly sees the field, but when he does, it is in the red zone. So we've seen him score a few touchdowns in his career and crack a few showdown slates open. And then finally, we've got the fullback for the other side of things at $200. These guys are over 2x points per dollar values, but it's not because of their projection. They've got less than a 1 raw point projection. It's because of the kind of price tag that they bring to the table. And if you're going to an elite tier captain like a Lamb, maybe one of those 2 running backs, and you need the salary, like there's a time and place to do so, but only in the large field GPPs. You wouldn't do it in cash. A single entry is just far too risky of a prospect, much more in line for the more volatile formats. And on the prop side of things, we got this 2-leg slip on Prize Picks. You might want to consider tailing for tonight. So first prop's going to be a CD Lamb over at 6.5 receptions. He's minus 130 plus on all the major books towards the over. So not quite a plus EV value on a 2-leg slip, but getting close to that. And by the time we get to lock, if it's closer to minus 140, he'll be over that sort of threshold. But from the traditional analysis perspective, also makes a whole lot of sense because for the year, if you take a look at his track record, 4 of his 5 full games, he's had over 10 targets. Still the clear #1 wide receiver for Dallas when him and Pickens are healthy, and also the matchup really helps a CD Lamb as well. He's a versatile wide receiver, can play on the outside or the inside. They have some pretty good safeties on the Raiders, but going over the middle, playing that slot role is going to lead to better matchups for CD Lamb. So at 6.5 receptions, that's part of the reason I like this. Getting close to that plus EV value was the other aspect of it. And then on the other side of the game, we're getting some slight correlation here, and I don't expect the Raiders to be leading or to win tonight's game, but with it only being a 3.5 point spread, if they are leading at any point during the second half, that would greatly help us with both of these leans, because if the Cowboys are playing from behind, that would spur on more passing usage for them, and in turn, even more receptions for CD. But on the flip side, that would also lead to more rushing usage for Genty. So I think it's just kind of like the cherry on top here. It's not something we should be counting on with that kind of a game script, but if it does come to fruition, it would help us out with the second lean as well, which is the Ashton Genty over at 65.5 rushing yards. I got this at 62.5, and the books have been unbelievably bump heavy this morning. Moving, of the 6 props I entered, I think 4 or even 5 of them have already bumped at this point. CD Lamb was at 6.5 on Underdog. It is now already a 0.88x multiplier over there. Of course, guys, the Patreon page is where you can catch all of the props, every single piece of exposure as I'm entering it before any of that line movement. But even 3 yards higher at 65.5, I don't think it's the worst lean that I've ever seen, especially with that potential correlation with the other side. And the reason why I liked it at 62.5 is that he was up at 64, 65.5 on books, and minus 125 to minus 135 towards the over. So even at these sort of projections, he had juice in that direction. So maybe not as ideal as you could have gone a little bit earlier on my Patreon page, but still I think a solid prop to go out there and enter. And this is still a 3x payout, which is kind of the reason why we enter this on a site like Prize Picks, because there is correlation clearly between both of these sort of leans, and we're not getting deducted for it when it comes to that payout. So that'll be an example of a slip that I'm taking for Monday Night Football. We had a Brock Bowers under on touchdowns. That was even money, and now it's juiced towards the under on Underdog. We had a CD Lamb under on fantasy points. So I do like the over on receptions, but I took his under on fantasy points at like 16.55 on Underdog. Those moved in less than like 20 minutes. So like I said, they've been all over my case this weekend when it comes to the bumps, but the place to catch those before any of that happens is the Patreon page and the link in the description of the video. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the Monday Night Football breakdown. Go ahead, smash that like button if you haven't already. Also subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. And go ahead and comment the top score for Monday Night Football for a chance to earn a free month on my Patreon page. And as long as you're the first person to guess that top score, you'll win a free month access to everything I have to offer. That includes all of my DFS projections, the spreadsheets you saw before with all my up-to-date projections, and my entire player pool. And on the prop and the betting side of things, all the Underdog and Prize Picks props and HardrockBet props that I'm entering for the slate. So that's completely free if you guys guess that top score. Best of luck with that, and also all of your exposure for tonight. I hope to see a lot of your names towards the top end of those GPPs, and let's cash out on our prop exposure to add to the bankroll too. That's all I've got. I appreciate your support here on the channel, everyone. Best of luck with everything as I was saying, and I'll see you guys for Thursday Night Football a little bit later on this week.